Hello everybody, welcome to Planet SkyFF, the world where everything revolves around £50,000. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
We've made it to the Overhaul, James. I didn't make it to my target.
What were you expecting? Death?
I didn't make it to my target of 5,600 overall. Could be worse. I'm still there. Well, keep plugging away. Still exists. Keep plugging away. Still hoping to get up to.
I had my account hacked.
Nah. But I'm just looking. I think I've got 20. Well, it doesn't tell me how many transfers I've got left now because obviously it says unlimited.
So you don't remember these
25 or 26? I think it's 26.
I have 20 left in my main team. I am 626th.
Nice. Let's keep marching upwards. Obviously, there's a big gap to the top, but there's big opportunity about to enter as well. We were hoping to get some fixtures. We haven't had some fixtures. So the reality is that everybody's Overhaul teams are going to be hugely influenced by the fixture drop that we will get before the end of Overhaul, barring like a disaster of some sort. So we should get a fixture drop before the end of Overhaul. So the reality is that we'll revisit it next week when we have these fixtures. Touch wood, everybody pray that we get those fixtures, and we can kind of get into more specific detail.
We are going to get fixtures. They should have been announced on Monday. Then they were going to be announced last night, and it was pushed back. Then they were going to be announced at 10 o'clock this morning. And by the time you hear this, you might even have those fixtures. We're recording, it's just gone 12 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, UK time. And I suspect we probably will get fixtures today. Fortunately, we're going to do a heavy fixture schedule podcast next Wednesday. The plan with this one was to look a little bit differently. A watch list of players under consideration. And I've also given Suj a little bit of a task, which I've done as well, which is to kind of remove our Sky heads for a moment and ask ourselves, what team would we pick in Sky, with considering set prices, etc., if we weren't to factor in captaincy, fixtures, anything? What's the best 11 we could put together with the 100 million, not considering any of the factors which we obviously do need to consider in Sky? And the reason I bring this up is to consider the overplaying of captaincy, for example, i.e. many of us, myself included, just bought a Watford player a couple of weeks ago. Wasn't worth it, was it?
Okay, so and you've got a watch list of you mentioned 65 odd players that you think is what we're working with. Let's start with this teams that we've put together. I've got to say something.
Go on.
I didn't listen properly then.
To what?
Well, I'll tell you why. Well, I'm talking about captaincy specifically. What I've done is I've only picked one player per club, bar Liverpool where I've got two, so that I've got coverage everywhere. Okay. So I haven't particularly said, well, I'll captain him on this day and captain him on that day, but I've picked a squad where I've got 10 different clubs, and so I should probably be covered from all angles.
Well, interestingly, I've only got 2 from 2 clubs, and the rest is 1 player from other clubs.
Fine.
So there is still that psychological nature where you go, he's the best asset from club X, and therefore he becomes considerable for Sky, in the same way we talk about talisman in FPL.
Yes, indeed. So what do you want to do? Do you want to go position by position, or should we just reveal our teams?
I'm most interested to know first what formation you went with.
4-4-2.
Okay. Only 2 up front.
Only 2 up front.
Only 4 at the back.
Yeah.
Go on then. Who you got in goal?
Jose Sarr.
Because?
Watford coverage, good goalkeeper, keeping clean sheets. I think he's a safe pair of hands.
I've gone with David De Gea.
I didn't want any other Watford players. I haven't got any Manchester United, by the way.
I've gone with David De Gea because I think in the best team I wouldn't be fitting in Cristiano Ronaldo. De Gea also, the reason I like him more than, say, Sarr or Ramsdale is I think there are defensive players that you would consider at Wolves in Max Kilman, in Arsenal, particularly Gabriel, Ben White, possibly even Kieran Tierney. At Manchester United, you wouldn't consider any of their defensive players. Harry Maguire, I think, is the highest scoring Man United player. He's got about 40 points, I want to say. De Gea's on well over 100.
Yeah. That's an incredibly low total for Harry Maguire. I didn't expect that. I can see your logic. I've just swerved the entire football club of Manchester United.
We should add at this point, yes, we know we're probably all starting with Nick Pope. This is a hypothetical argument. What you got defensively?
So, Cancelo, tick.
Yeah, agreed.
Rudiger, tick.
Yep, agreed.
Trent Alexander-Arnold,
Yep, agreed.
tick. Adam Webster.
I haven't got Adam Webster. I've gone a little bit different. I've gone more powerful at the back, so I've got Laporte with Cancelo.
Can I add something?
Yep.
I have 2.3 million in the bank.
So you could go Webster to Laporte.
I had Laporte originally, and the reason I took Laporte out for Webster was 10 clubs, give me more coverage of clubs. But if the brief was best player, Laporte is better than Webster.
Okay.
If you told me spend all the money, Webster to Laporte is probably the move.
Spend all the money, forget spreading it. You're putting Laporte in over Webster.
Agreed.
Okay,
agreed.
The fifth defender I've got is Gabriel. I think he's doing really well at Arsenal. I think the passing tiers are on the increase. I think
he's very consistent with his tiers. Yeah,
he's 8.2. It's decent
Fair
value.
price.
He's worth a little bit extra than Ben White, in my opinion.
There's not much between them. Ben White's 7.8 from memory.
So therefore, I've got a back five from City, Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, and Manchester United.
Agree. Yeah, I'm not too. I mean, Wolves are just as good defensively as Manchester United. You can't argue that Manchester United are better defensively, although from what we saw at the weekend with Varane and Maguire both there, yeah, they are stronger. There's nothing to suggest those guys can stay fit for the rest of the season. Adam Webster allows a bit more budget elsewhere, potentially, if you are...
Adam Webster could definitely end up in my Overhaul team. Like, definitely.
Yeah. What about the midfield? So I'm cheap on the midfield, sir.
So you've gone 4.
Yes.
I've got 3.
Okay.
Go on, who you got?
The same midfield that I have right now.
I'm going to guess that's Ward-Prowse, Bowen, Gallagher, Rafinha.
No Gallagher. I've got Norgard in there.
Okay.
But actually, you mentioned Gallagher. I'd potentially... Yeah, Gallagher's a big problem.
So now you've put Gallagher in for Norgard. You've taken Laporte out for Webster again.
Well, I could do one of the two, right? But Rafinha, Ward-Prowse. Bowen's on fire, as they say. Ward-Prowse was a real pain, but then the last 4 or 5 weeks, he's suddenly picked up his consistency again. And Southampton have been better suddenly since they got taken over, and everyone's thinking, give me a new contract in the summer, Mr. Rich owner. But Ward-Prowse has been doing bits. Rafinha, talismanic, and if anything's going to happen at Leeds, it's going to be him. And Norgard is possibly one of the best enablers in the game. 4s and 5s, so consistently. For
most tackles in the league by a distance. So, of course.
He's only 6.2 million. I think he is possibly one of the best enablers in the game. So
yep, agreed.
I'm happy with that midfield. I do think you're right, though. Missing Conor Gallagher is a mistake, and I should probably do something about that.
Up front, who's your 2?
Guess what? Mo Salah.
Obviously.
I don't know, shock horror there. I've got Harry Kane.
Okay.
I've got so much money.
I've got Sonny.
Yeah. Sonny I didn't pick because he's injured or flagged right now.
I think he'll be back for the Southampton game. Obviously, it's a little bit awkward in the sense that obviously the Overhaul is now on the Saturday night, 6 p.m. kickoff.
I don't think you told us your midfield,
Burnley,
by the way.
Watford, Gallagher, Bowen, Rafinha.
Okay, so yeah.
Again, I'm ignoring, for the principal idea behind this team, ignoring the Ward-Prowse single game day against Norwich.
Yeah.
To be honest, I had 10.8 million available for a forward, and I think he's the best. Son in this arguably is player 11. I wouldn't rule out starting with Harry Kane. I think Harry's shown signs over the last month of being back potentially to Harry Kane sort of levels in sort of his shot tiers and so you can see it. It's been building since the goal against Liverpool that the returns are more like what you'd expect with Harry Kane. I'd make a case to say, just genuinely anyway, that you may not be captaining him in any of his sort of first 3 fixtures or so, which then makes him kind of an expensive commodity for Sky Fantasy. Sonny at 10.8 is consistent as, isn't he? 1.2 million cheaper than Kane. Yeah. I would still slightly have preference for Harry Kane in this format, but I didn't want to go, say, Webster over Gabriel and then go Kane instead. But I guess for the ideal Sky team, that's the sort of movement I'd have been making, is Gabriel to Webster, Son to Kane would actually be the exact exchange of money. The reason I wanted to put this together as an idea was kind of open up people's thinking to say, when you're looking at these single game day fixtures, you think, oh my God, yeah, I need a Southampton player versus Norwich, or I want to cheap out with a goalkeeper because he's got these single game day, Nick Pope and stuff like that. I think it's worthwhile for everybody doing and considering and saying, look, what's the best team I can put together? Because there's a chance that you're going to want to come back to this. So if we take...
what you're saying is in 5 weeks, when we've got through the doubles and blanks and what have you, and you want a normal 10 games a week kind of team, what's your normal 10 games a week kind of team? And if you set yourself up that you're going to need to use 8-9 transfers to get back there, you might not have that luxury.
So we could all look at that team that both me and Suj have put together, and you'll have your own variations, and immediately go, well, there's no Burnley or Watford player. Mm-hmm. It's the first game day, and actually you could have a 3-for-0 straight from the start on a Burnley player and sell them immediately after the Tuesday game against Manchester United. You should start with one.
If you captain him,
the majority of us are going to start with Nick Pope. He's up to about 20% ownership in the top 1,000, and I know a lot of people don't even want to bother looking at their team at the moment till we get this overhaul drop. I've marked this team in my second team. I haven't touched my first team yet, for example. So Nick Pope's obviously going to be really popular. So for me then, right, Nick Pope in for David De Gea. But if I want David De Gea longer term, you have to look at it and say, okay, so what's the point then that I'm going to go Nick Pope to David De Gea? Am I even going to go Nick Pope to David De Gea, considering the amount of games Burnley obviously have to catch up? There could be more single game days to come. The games that Burnley have to rearrange still include Leicester, got no coverage from, Aston Villa, no coverage from, Everton, no coverage from, Tottenham, coverage of 1. So if those games suddenly begin dropping in, and the Leicester game can't happen anytime soon, unless Leicester go out of Europe, then I'm possibly going to need Nick Pope again. So is Nick Pope someone I just go, right, he's staying there for me longer term, and then by default of taking De Gea out, the only player that leaves me of interest for Manchester United is back to Ronaldo. Then do I need to start with Ronaldo? So I think it's a good principal idea to start with, look, what do you really want? Then come back to the fixtures once we've got the fixtures announced and dropped, and then see if you want to make moves in the future, plan them in that way.
Reverse engineering.
Or if you're just going to adjust and say, yeah, because of what you're saying there, shit, I'm just going to stick with Nick Pope throughout till Burnley have caught up with fixtures, which is absolutely a reasonable thing to do. But then in that case, exactly what I said, you probably are going to want Manchester United coverage at some point. United's fixtures until they play Man City in match week 28 are very good. So do you then need to start with Ronaldo? Do you then need to make sacrifices elsewhere? Rudiger. You're going to want a Chelsea player after the Carabao Cup final when they play Liverpool. Now, at the moment, of the next 4 match weeks, Chelsea have 1 fixture scheduled away to Crystal Palace.
Yep.
But after the Carabao Cup final, they have a brilliant run of fixtures and are also going to have a couple of games they need to catch up. Would you consider starting with someone like Rudiger, even under that circumstance, knowing you definitely want him?
Not with 26 transfers, no.
I don't think even in my position you do either.
No, I think if you're down to like 15, 16, then yes. Anything 20 or more, I wouldn't bother.
The other thing is as well, you could start with someone like Rudiger, and it's not like Chelsea don't have fixtures in between. He might get injured. He might, there from the start, he might get injured.
If he signs a pre-contract agreement with like Real Madrid or something, then you never know. They might just sideline him for a bit because he's off in the summer. I can't see that happening, but you never know.
But then it might be the case if you look at that sort of circumstance where we're saying Chelsea don't have fixtures till match week 28. Brighton, we think, might have a couple of their games rearranged before Chelsea's kind of second league game. There might be an effective sort of 6-for-1 there on Webster over Rudiger. And it might be then from Overhaul that I have that marked down as a planned transfer and generally start with 2 million in the bank from the start to make sure I can go with that sort of thing. Again, what you're saying, reverse engineering what you want.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean Chelsea can't have a fixture added in match week 25. It's a little bit awkward when we haven't got the schedule at the moment. It might look a little bit better for Chelsea. But the reality is, either way, they're certainly going to be behind the majority of teams on fixtures. So I don't think you'd start with a Chelsea player, would you? But this is why I still think this is a useful exercise for people to do, because the run of fixtures they have after that Carabao Cup final is so good. He'll be a regular captaincy option.
Yeah.
Be it Rudiger or Thiago Silva, whatever you prefer. But I think it's then go and buy it further down the line.
What's your thoughts then on this watch list? Do you want to go through a position by position in terms of goalkeepers? There's David De Gea, Ramsdale, Pope, Sarr. There's a few that can put their hand up.
No, you're making it awkward. I've gone by team.
Oh, great.
Even better. I think it's easier to go from a watch list perspective. I think it's easier to go by team because it may eliminate a position
Correct.
at some point for you and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, majority of us are going to start with Cancelo, I think.
No doubt.
Laporte is borderline for me. I think a lot of people will go with Rodri. I think Ruben Diaz's ownership is going to be surprisingly low, but I think that's because there's 1.5 million difference between Diaz and Laporte. Bernardo Silva is 8.5. He's not done great for me over the last month or so, but he does tick over, and he's in at that value where it's interesting, where you can move it very easily to your Ward-Prowses, your Bowens, your Rafinhas, etc. Kevin De Bruyne is the real kind of gamble name, I think. 11.5, historically so capable of major hauls in this game. Only 89 points this season.
Yeah.
I think the majority of people will start with Cancelo. I definitely will, as long as he's fit. Laporte's going to be borderline. I don't think I'm going to go there. The other thing to factor with City, of course, is no games to rearrange.
Yes.
But when obviously Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Leicester missed that weekend because of the Carabao Cup final, City obviously play, which is important. So actually in the immediate period, they're not actually going to lose out so much on the fixtures. So there's still definitely scope for starting with a couple of them, and they've got good fixtures as well.
Yeah.
And you may well want that cover for Cancelo in case a rest is forthcoming now that Champions League is restarting. I think I would still like to go with Laporte. I think Rodri is probably going to be a no for me. He's a great comfort blanket. I think you can feel very safe with him. He's definitely the best of the midfielders for passing tiers, very clearly. But I think I would rather have other captaincy options. Which should forward. Any thoughts on the likes of Foden for you, or
no? If I'm going to go with a second City player that's a midfielder or what have you, there's no strikers. I'd try and find a way to get to KDB.
It just feels too expensive. Like, is he worth 3 million more than Bernardo, for example?
No, but I'm trying to be different. If I'm trying to make up ground and I want an alternative captaincy, Kevin De Bruyne is the one that can smash in the 20-point haul that doubles up to 40. So if I want an additional City, I think it's going to try and find Kevin De Bruyne to add to Cancelo and possibly Laporte.
Liverpool.
Is it the same as FPL? So Salah, Trent, Robertson, Jota. VVD's always been historically decent in this game.
I don't think Robertson's not a consideration for me.
No. Too close in price to Trent, right?
And too close in price to Virgil van Dijk for me as well.
Yeah.
I think Van Dijk will outscore Robertson. I don't know if there might be a little bit of recency bias in people's thinking with Robertson, because he just performed very well. Was it 8 assists in his last 4 or 5 or so? But it's not the passing tier that comes with it. And you see at the weekend, Virgil gets 1 goal and can match it, basically, right? So Van Dijk, I can't see me going with. I think Trent, I've been without for the majority of the Sky season. And,
me too.
And don't like it. He's another real comfort blanket player, isn't he? The only other player I think is really interesting, possibly to consider from Liverpool, and I think it'd be really off-putting for people now that Firmino's back, is Jota.
He's priced well.
He's 9.4. He's got 115 points. I think he's second of forwards now, I want to say, in the game. So if we're looking to go to up front and it's scraping the barrel a little bit, why not consider sticking Jota with Salah from arguably the best attacking team in the league? So I won't rule Jota out as an alternative idea. Might fall for if I don't think I need the captaincy from that second player, I think I'll consider him. I'm never going to captain Jota over Salah.
No.
Unless I got a team sheet and Salah wasn't in it, in which case, yeah, great, you could consider it. But I think Jota's ownership will be really low, and he's a very interesting differential, I think.
Who've got next on your list?
Chelsea. I mean, I think, as kind of already said, I think you're probably in a position of not starting with any of them unless something unexpected drops with these fixtures. Rudiger, for me, is the standout at 9.0. Do you know how many points less Thiago Silva's got than Rudiger this season?
No idea, but Thiago scored a few goals, and I like Thiago Silva as a good player. So I don't think it's going to be many. I think it's going to be quite tight.
It's only 4, and there's 0.4 between the two of them. So I think Thiago Silva offers perhaps further down the line, if he's fit at the right time, at slightly cheaper, possibly an alternative to, I think, again, people will go with Rudiger because just a little bit of assuredness of starts. Once Champions League restarts, is Thiago going to play 3 games a week? But I think He's still absolutely magnificent, by the way, Thiago. The only attacking player from Chelsea that would maybe interest is Mason Mount.
Yeah.
9.2 is a little on the expensive side in comparison to those kind of around the 8 million bracket. But he ticked over really well this season in terms of returns. I cannot see me being interested in the likes of Lukaku or a Ziyech or a Hudson-Odoi breaking out. I just don't see it. But I think defensively, in a month's time, you're going to want to get into Chelsea and get into them quickly.
Yep.
I think.
Manchester United.
I'm doing this in league table order, by the way. So the only two players that really interest me are De Gea and Ronaldo.
Bruno Fernandes, if he was to pick up some form and consistency, is obviously always a consideration, but not on current form.
Ronaldo, really, I think, is too much money. It's not worth it. He hasn't shown enough. But it's a consideration for me because I think, like many, I'm going to end up starting with Pope.
Yeah.
And I think from a captaincy perspective, again, difficult to say till we've got all the fixtures for March and these rearranged midweeks in front of our face. I think I'm probably going to need something Manchester United. But then do I want to pay the extra for Ronaldo? I've got two other United players listed on a watch list. Lingard and De Beek.
Because they might move somewhere.
Well, possibly. Lingard at 8.2 rocking up at Newcastle might suddenly be quite interesting.
If
that's
for
what
sure.
happens.
Van der Beek at Palace now, isn't it?
Van der Beek is 7.9. But then Palace is the one that's potentially been linked. But you ain't going to Beek over Gallagher, are you?
No.
At 0.6 more.
Yeah.
So
Gallagher's only 7.
Lingard might be an interesting one, though, 8.2, depending on where he ends up. Again, he's in that value of so many players that if it's bad, you've got escapes all around you. Or alternatively, if you're at value, you can obviously go to him quite quickly. But Jesse Lingard's one, I think, is a really interesting one to keep in mind before the transfer window shuts. I have no interest in any of other United players like Greenwood, Rashford stuff. Nah.
West Ham.
No. I've got Arsenal above West Ham.
Arsenal
Sorry,
are above
mate.
us in the league now, aren't they?
Are they?
I don't know. I think you're going in league.
I think they are, yeah. Ramsdale, I think, is great consideration. 6.8, very fair price. You can sit him there and leave him there. I prefer Gabriel over White. I
agree with you on that one.
If I start with one of them, and I may not, it's really dependent on Arsenal's fixtures because Arsenal might only have 2 fixtures in the next sort of 4 match days. So it might be that I start without one. Gabriel's the one I'd want to start with, though. 8.2. Saka, again, falls into that midfield value where he could be of interest, particularly if you decide to go with sort of Webster City players and Trent, for example. You might decide you want some coverage. Perhaps, obviously, if you're going Pope in goal as well, you may want an Arsenal player. So I think Saka 8.5. Martinelli is a forward. He's 7.8. And interesting is what I would say. But I can't see him being one that I would start with. West Ham, Bowen
or bust, really.
I cannot see how I'd start without him with the form he's in. Great opening fixture against Watford. Arguably captain that night, I think, possibly for many. Declan Rice, 0.8 cheaper. It's ticked over really nice. We've been guilty of ignoring him in the past.
Agreed,
but I can't see me going there because I want Jared Bowen. Therefore, it probably rules out Antonio as well. But 8.8 is still a good price, isn't he?
He is, but I think we need to see some goal scoring form back for Antonio.
I don't think you go with both, do you?
No, I'm not going to go both.
And I think for me...
It's Bowen or bust for me, really, with West Ham.
It would be Bowen over Antonio, yeah.
Yeah.
Spurs, who would you consider Suj from Spurs?
Kane or Son.
Any thoughts on Hugo, 7.3?
No.
Eric Dyer, 7.9.
There's just other players around, mate.
Pierre Højbjerg,
Webster over him.
8.1.
I'll take Ward-Prowse for 0.1 more. I'll take Gallagher at 0.9 less. There's a list of players I'd have over Højbjerg.
Luis Diaz, 10.4.
James is in dreamland. James is in dreamland. I think for me it's Kane or Son, really.
Yeah, ideally one of them, I think. Particularly when the forward options feel so limited. Although there's a forward player I want to start with is quite cheap, who I'll come on to in a bit. But I think, Son or Kane. And to be honest, it probably comes down to affordability. If you want to start with one, I think there's reasonable claim to say don't start with a Tottenham player. Southampton, Wolves, then Man City. It's not a brilliant opening set of fixtures.
Wolves.
Spurs' first game against Southampton, City play Brentford.
Right.
Are you going to captain Kane or Son over Cancelo if he's playing. I don't think you are. Same thing.
No.
Brighton. Wolves.
Wolves, I was going to say, yeah. Joseph Sarr.
Yeah. I'm really interested in Max Kilman as well.
What price is Max Kilman?
6.2.
That's a very good price.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't afford Webster and you really want to go down, I think at that price, he's the best player in the game, maybe.
I think Max Kilman could be the one that ends up sitting in quite a few teams as the budget guy that enables me a lot of other stuff. What, are they third or fourth best defensively?
Yeah.
This season. I don't think there's another player in around his defensive value who is trustworthy enough. So I think if we're saying Sarr versus Kilman, I agree. I'd rather have Jose Sarr. But that defence, if you go Sarr, you can't go with a Manchester United or an Arsenal player at that value. If you go De Gea or Ramsdale in goal, you can go Max Kilman defensively, and that's the sort of thing you need to think about and consider.
Yeah.
So I think Kilman 6.2 is the best knocking about at that value. There won't be a lot of passing tiers. There will be a few clean sheets, and he's a unit as well. He'll get the very odd attacking return. I think a number of people had him when he scored against Everton, didn't he, on that Monday night after roundabouts game week 9 or 10 or so.
Raul Jimenez?
No consideration.
Nah, me neither. Nothing.
No interest in Wolves attacking players under this format. That includes Adama Traore if he does move. No interest at all. Leicester. Brighton. So Sanchez, I think you can still consider. 6.5 in goal. Lewis Dunk was back on the bench for Brighton against Leicester at the weekend. So presumably by the time Brighton's next league game comes round, which it's worth remembering isn't in that midweek set of fixtures, it's not till the weekend afterwards. That's because them and Chelsea don't play in that midweek due to Chelsea's Club World Cup involvement. Lewis Dunk, 8.2. Webster, 7. You think Dunk's worth the extra 1.2?
If you can afford it, I do think he is.
He'll be such a differential, I think.
I think if you can afford it, I think he is.
The thing is, though, you might be able to afford it at the start, but you might not be able to see what lies ahead is the issue. I also think, interestingly with Brighton, because they don't play at the start, I think a lot of people may start without them, and I think it might be a sensible idea to start with one. I think Trossard's interesting, actually, as well. 7.9, differential in midfield. I think he's one to consider. Like I said, we think, and again, we're recording at a time where we haven't got the fixtures, we think Brighton might end up playing sort of 5 times within sort of a 15-day period or so. And there might not be any captaincies in there, but the fixtures will be pretty good. So I would keep Brighton in mind. I think Trossard's an interesting differential to raise in that midfield area. I think Dunk versus Webster probably comes down to affordability. I can't see many people starting with, say, Webster and Kilman.
No,
I don't think. I don't even think it's necessarily one or the other because it'd be neither, right? You can go Dunk, Trent, Cancelo.
As an enabler, I mean, you're going to have one cheap defender if you want to.
There's a case once you're cheaping that out, I think Dunk versus Webster, do you want to cheap it out further and go for Kilman? Leicester, interesting name, who's just come back from injury as well. James Justin, 7.5. Now, defensively, they don't look capable of anything at the moment. But he was great for so many. And actually, that price is reasonable. Leicester, the big problem they have is I think their attacking players are possibly a little bit overpriced. Maddison 8.8, Tielemans 8.7. Vardy looks like he's going to be out for quite a while, which could make Iheanacho 9.1 once he's back from AFCON, and Daka 8.5. Possibly interesting. I think Iheanacho is a real wild card possibility for those looking to go, say, 5-3-2. But they're not going to have any of those additional fixtures while they're in Europe. We know that. So there's no gain on them. The game they've got to rearrange is Norwich. And while they're in Europe, that's not getting rearranged, basically, to cut a long story short. So that Norwich, if you think, that Leicester-Norwich game might drop in soon, it could between match weeks 28 and 30, but only if Leicester lose to the Danish team Randers in the Conference League. Otherwise, it's not likely to be till April or May. So there isn't anything, obviously, where you feel like you need Leicester.
You don't want to go there to gain an advantage, no. Yeah, Villa are one team that all the FPL rage at the moment, and obviously are doing well, but haven't had a mention at all in this podcast so far. So go on, tell me, Ollie Watkins under consideration. Yep,
9.2, fair price. Like it's escapable to say Antonio a little bit cheaper and stuff. I think he's definitely got the favouritism over Danny Ings.
Yeah,
it doesn't overly appeal to. I see what's going to happen with them with fixtures, but he's certainly under consideration. Best enabler in the midfield area below Norgard, if you want to go below that, is Jacob Ramsey at Aston Villa. Is 5.8 million. Not going to be many tiers with that, and as we highlighted on our podcast Monday, I think with Coutinho added to that team now, it's possibly a slightly deeper role for him.
Threats curtailed a little bit.
So I think you probably are looking at 2s and the odd 4 or 5 to come for him. I think actually at this stage I'd probably go Norgard over Ramsey, I think, personally. Martinez we should never rule out.
No.
7.2. When Dia is 7.9, I think offers a real interesting alternative to most people maybe thinking Coutinho at 8.4.
Any consideration on Luca Dean?
Not for me. I think it's 8.5 Luca Dean.
Too expensive.
Under this format, couldn't consider him over Dunk, Gabriel, I don't think.
Yep. Saints. Ward-Prowse, obviously, he's 8.2 million.
It's 8.6.
8.6 million, sorry, yeah. He's so consistent when he is in a good vein of form. Attacking threat, 1 in every 3. He'll knock in a free kick or get an assist or what have you. He'll pick up a tier point 2 out of every 3. He's really good.
He's going to be so popular as well because of that Friday night game against Norwich, and we think that they might be having the fixture with Newcastle rearranged for around about that time as well, which could be really interesting and certainly makes their fixtures look a little bit more attractive. To start with Tottenham away and Manchester United away, but then there's a good run of fixtures for them. Couple of alternatives though, and he will be massively owned, I'm sure, James Ward-Prowse. But at the moment, I'm thinking of going without. Salisu, 6.6 defensively. He's got the most interceptions in the league. You don't get points for that in this game, but he does pick up a good few tackle tiers because of that as well.
Yeah.
However, I don't think I could justify that over Max Kilman unless I wanted him to be my captain on a couple of occasions. Armando Broja, 6.6.
So cheap.
I'm going to go with him over Ward-Prowse. I think that's what's in my thinking at the moment. The danger with that is, of course,
doesn't play.
If it goes wrong, where do you go?
Yeah.
That's obviously the problem.
You set yourself up with the formation that you can go to Norgard or Kilman. So you don't restrict yourself so that you can't buy another midfielder or
but then I think
defender.
I probably want to go 5-3-2, which then makes him dangerous because you can't go 5-4-1, and obviously you can't go 6-3-1, unfortunately. So it probably means what you said, going 3 up front, adding a Tottenham player possibly to go with him, and going 4-3-3. That's kind of loosely what I've got in mind at the moment. But yeah, I just think that price actually is too good. And of course, you can always escape to Dennis once he's back.
Oh, of course.
At 5.5. So, there are escapes. There are a few other forwards in and around that price bracket we're going to mention. If you leave sort of 1.34 in the bank, you can always get up to sort of your Tony level and stuff like that as well. One player you could jump up to, interestingly, actually, is at Palace. Who's another player, honestly, I won't rule out, but I can't see me paying ahead of Gallagher, is Edouard. Mm-hmm. He's 7.7. That's a decent price as well. 83 points so far. Mark Gay, I think, is the standout Palace one, 7.2, but I think majority of people Gallagher at 7.3 is such good value.
Yeah, get it in. Get it in and get it done.
I think. Yeah. If Gallagher was 8.3, most people would still be considering having him. I think it's the point here.
Yeah.
So I think that 7.3, it's absolute gold. He's definitely the best at around about that value. I think Tony, because of the lack of options up front, he's worth considering for Brentford, 7.9. They have a couple of interesting fixtures coming up, but Norgard 6.2. Norgard's got 15 points less than Tony.
And he's so much cheaper. For me, Brentford decision is really dictated by what fixtures they have. Rearranged and whether or not I need captaincy coverage from them. Otherwise, I'll probably skip it. I don't think I need to drop down to Norgard and save money. He was there originally, but Gallagher, I think, is a better bet. So I'll go Norgard over Tony, but I'm only going to Brentford if I need to, not if I want to.
Leeds, no consideration for me other than Rafinha.
Yeah, simple.
I would love to say Diego Llorente if I think he could be fit for more than a week or two at sort of 7.2, but no, Bamford looks like it's ongoing problems. No interest in them other than, Rafinha's blindingly obvious. Doesn't mean you have to start with him, of course, and plenty won't. It depends on that fixture dump, whether I do or I don't, I think. I'm not wed to. I've got to have him at this stage, but I do think he's a great Sky asset. Everton, I've got next to no interest in.
I mean, so much is dictated by who comes in to become the next manager. If they get a new manager and they kind of can get a song out of the team and what have you, then maybe Calvert-Lewin, maybe Richarlison, but there are too many doubts around all of that before we can go near Everton.
The only thing I would say is they've got a couple of interesting fixtures with which Newcastle next, isn't it? And then Leeds at home, I think they've got afterwards as well. And the rearranged game with Newcastle could also fall into this period. Someone like Richarlison in a 4-3-3 might be a good placeholder for Rudiger, if you're kind of thinking about it that way, rather than think, I've got to have a set defender. You could look at someone like Richarlison who'll have low ownership, say, look, yeah, sod it, I'm going to gamble with him till Rudiger's back available again. It depends how the fixtures land and stuff. But that's the only sort of way I can see me considering. Gray at 7.8 is a decent price, but I can't see me picking him over Rafinha, even without good fixtures, for example.
Yep.
Newcastle.
Norwich.
Norwich before, aren't they?
They are, mate. They're out of the relegation zone. 17th in the table.
Angus Gunn is 5.5. We don't have the information on how long Krul might be out. Yeah. You are setting yourself up for a fall, let me assure you. Yeah. But would you consider it if the transfer window was shut and Krul was ruled out for the season? Would you consider it 5.5?
Nah. If I was getting Gunn, I'd be shooting myself in the
one
foot.
thing about Krul is he's one of the highest for save tier points.
Okay, but it doesn't mean Gunn will be.
I just think it's not that far up to go to a regular Assar or Ramsdale and that sort of thing, yeah. Cut the forwards because they are in and around that kind of Breuer value and actually cheaper. Josh Sargent obviously scored twice at Watford. That's the one we should have bought as 5.9. I think Adam Eder we've spoken about him a lot on the FPL content recently. He's 6.1. He's just, definitely not saying get him. No one's getting him on Sky Overhaul, but maybe just keep him in your mind at 6.1 as the sort of player you might be able to escape to if you decide to go down the Breuer route. Newcastle could make a case maybe for Dubravka, 6.3, if they get further defensive reinforcements in. We know they're going to spend in the next week or so. St. Maximin, 7.9. I think I'd prefer him over Damari Gray at this stage. Chris Wood's 8.6. Feels a little pricey, I think. Yeah. Dennis, I think it's absolutely brilliant for the Sky game that Dennis got sent off against Norwich. Not for those who captained him, I'm sorry. I mean more for what's about to happen next, because I don't think anyone can start with him.
Yeah.
With the fact that he's obviously suspended for the Burnley game. Now, there's some that still will, because he's obviously incredible value at 5.5. But I think had he not been, we probably would have maybe started.
Too many would have gone in. Yeah, you're trying to avoid this template.
The flip is, I think he now his red card is forcing everyone towards Nick Pope. Whereas you might have got a bit more of a split about it. So the only Watford player really you can consider is Josh King, I think, isn't it? 7.6.
It's a bit expensive. I'd rather go Breuer.
King versus Pope. I mean, we'll talk about it more next week, but it's Pope, isn't it?
With the rearranged fixtures that Burnley still have to add into the mix and the longer term hold, yes, definitely. And we don't even know how Roy's going to set them up yet.
And the only one I can make a case to go against for Nick Pope, and it depends what happens with AFCON, is Maxwell Cornet.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's explosive. If you needed captaincy coverage and you wanted a high ceiling, then Cornet is really there.
He's 7.7, and presumably if they don't buy a forward, he's obviously going to play up front. I mean, that's a real wild card pick, but that's the only one I could recommend. Even defensive have changed it up a bit, haven't they? Connor Roberts came in for Lowton at the weekend at right back. Is Tarkowski going to stay or go? You know the Barnes. I know a lot of people joked, oh yeah, blanket Burnley defence. You're not doing that. I wouldn't be adding anything on top of Nick Pope, and I think most of us will, by default, start with him. His ownership's going to be massive, isn't it, for that first game? And like I said, you can even take him for the Saturday, take him for the Tuesday against Manchester United, and if it's not what you want longer term, move it even on. It's a 3-for-0 right from the start, and it'll be a 4-for-1 over some from the start even.
Yeah, and that's a pretty comprehensive and decent list, I think, that covers off all of the players that might be under consideration. Of course, the transfer window is open, so a few more signings might come in before next week, Tuesday, and we'll discuss those on next Wednesday's show, when we'll be much closer to finalising where we are with our overhaul, if not already finalised with the fixtures
next
already
Wednesday.
announced.
There's no way this time next week we haven't got everything for February, March. I think even the midweek rearranged fixtures, I think we'll be able to sit here and know everything this time next week, I think.
Yeah, look forward to it. And so wherever you are listening to the podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe or follow or notification bell or whatever else you can do to share the love, including like the podcast or YouTube video or all that other stuff. If you're a keen Sky player, as I mention each and every week, you may want to consider joining our Patreon. Sometimes we do extra Sky podcasts, but there is a Slack channel dedicated to Sky Fantasy Football with a fixture tracking spreadsheet that James does on a consistent basis that gives you the best entry points, exit points, captaincy coverage, and so on, to help you along with this game.
Next week is February. Is it next week?
It is.
It's
the 2nd of February. Thursdays, Wednesday when we record will be the 2nd of February. Mate.
2nd of February. There will be at least one Sky podcast on Patreon next week. It may even be two.
Yeah, lovely jubbly. So, you may want to consider joining our army of patrons there. Other than that, that's a lot, isn't it, really? We'll be back at you tomorrow. There's a clash of the correspondents.
Happy tinkering.
And, enjoy. And stay safe. Look after yourselves. We'll be back tomorrow. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man child.